Hi, everybody. My name is Miles, and I'm a disability inclusion partner with Peak Performers, a staffing agency that's a nonprofit that helps put professionals with disabilities to work. Today, I have Sydney Elaine Butler that's going to be joining me to talk about disability benefits. Specifically, here in the States, we might refer to them as SSI or SSDI. We're going to talk a little bit more about what those benefits are, but moreover, we're going to talk about reform and why we both feel that many of these benefits are broken and leads to cycles where people often feel caught in a cycle of guaranteed poverty. So, this is also a very contentious issue that raises a lot of emotions. I would encourage you to reach out to lawmakers because this is something that is an ongoing issue that affects livelihoods of many people with disabilities and oftentimes those that are most disadvantaged within our society. So please take a time to express that these kinds of things and these kinds of wages are not acceptable. But having said that, I do want to bring Sydney on to talk a little bit more about that. And Sydney, you're an accessibility professional, but please give us an introduction for who you are and what makes you tick.
Yes, so hi everyone. Thank you for having me, Miles. So I'm Sydney Elaine Butler. I am neurodivergent and disabled. I work in the space of accessibility. I have a background in human resources and realized that human resources and businesses weren't really accessible and inclusive to people like me. And so I realized I wanted to do more as an external consultant, coach, and speaker, and really bring awareness to these issues around employment and then also bringing light to issues that people with disabilities face every day.
I love that. And you may recognize Sydney because I had her on very recently for the latest episode of My Disability Story, another ongoing series that I had, where Sydney shared her own personal experiences with a range of different disabilities, including fibromyalgia, too. And Sydney has a way of making me. Rethink the way that I view things in the world here. And particularly, I would encourage that you check out the conversation that we had talking about co-occurring conditions and how co-occurring conditions are the norm, not the exception. And each of us are dealing with our own unique cocktail of disabilities, neurodiversities, and chronic health conditions that uniquely affect the way we interact within the world. The other real quick caveat that I'm going to give here is that I do not currently receive any disability benefits. Sydney, my understanding is that you don't receive any kind of disability benefits either. But we would encourage you to seek out people within the community that you know that are receiving those for
Mhm.
additional perspectives on this very important issue. But having said this, Sydney, what did I miss? Like, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I currently do not receive benefits, and I think I would agree, reach out to people that do receive benefits and really have a conversation about how that impacts them and what it actually looks like on a day-to-day basis and how it really impacts their lives, and really understanding that I think a lot of people think the benefits that are received are kind of a blanket solution, and it's not, and I think really recognizing how like you said guaranteed poverty, I call it legislative poverty, and I think people use both terms and just really looking at what that actually means in the day-to-day and the reality.
You know, the reason that I call it guaranteed poverty is that it can take a long time and be very complicated
Mhm,
for people to attain benefits. And by the poverty, let's talk about individual numbers. For an individual receiving SSI or Social Security insurance, that in
mhm,
the States is basically when a person is uh, disabled and from a very young age, typically,
mhm,
or it's oftentimes is coming from a lifelong condition. The maximum an individual can earn is $994 per month, and the maximum that a couple can earn is $1,491 a month.
mhm,
Now, I live in Austin, Texas. I don't know about you. I hear
mhm.
Canada can be kind of expensive too, but that's not exactly enough to live on.
Yeah, in Canada, so we have a couple of different ones. So we have now the Canadian disability benefit,
Mhm.
and the maximum monthly benefit is $200. And in 2025, I believe the maximum benefit was only 2,400 per year. And then
Wow.
because we also have provincial benefits, and so they can be in tandem. But so where I live in Ontario, Canada, and the maximum that you can get for that is, let me just pull up my notes to make sure like I know it, but like just to make sure, especially with I've been dealing with brain fog, I don't want to get it wrong. I just saw it in my notes, but I can't find it. But
Oh,
it basically in with the ODSP, I have a note one number for sure. So previously in 2017, oh, up to 2017, you could only have $5,000 in assets if you were getting those benefits. Now they
mhm.
increased it to 40,000, but that's nothing.
Yeah.
And even that, like you said, Miles, like it takes a while to actually get the benefits. You have to have a caseworker usually to see where's this money being allocated, where you're using it towards, and there's still a lot of hurdles to even getting the benefits and maintaining and keeping the benefits. And so
And we
I
have
had a
oh,
friend
sorry,
and
go
we were
ahead.
actually doing okay. I was just like just quick story. I had a friend that I was working with. We were doing we had a grassroots organization. We were putting on a march, and at the time we hadn't opened a bank account for it. We were in the process because it's a grassroots organization, but we were mostly trying to get donations and stuff like that. And so I had to pay her back at the end of that to make sure through what we got through donations. And I had to give it to her in cash. So because it wouldn't be in her bank account. So it wouldn't claw back her benefits. That's an extreme example, but that's the lived reality of someone. And she's on the ODSP. And that's the real life example of, again, the hurdles and the barriers that exist.
And I have a different kind of story, but I think that it
Mhm,
speaks to the same kind of thing. Now, contrary to many popular opinions of people with disabilities that are receiving benefits not doing anything, actually many of them do work. But the challenge is that a lot of times the jobs that they have, they turn down promotions, they turn down raises, they turn down more hours because they have to keep it below a certain threshold. And I remember that we were looking at doing work with another organization. And that organization explained to me the unique challenges of being able to staff for
mhm,
people that would be actively turning down raises and actively
mhm,
turning down more hours of work. And the wages, for the record, were pretty low anyway. And I
mhm.
just remember just how upset that made me to think that so many people would be turning down more economic opportunity because they were so afraid to lose what they were guaranteed. But I'll give you another example. It's actually very common for many people with different disabilities. Like any of us, they find their significant other, they find their plus one, and they stay with them forever. However, they never actually tie the knot because you may have heard me mention before that if you're an individual, you can get
Mhm.
$994 a month, whereas if you're a couple, you can get $1,491 a month. So technically, to maximize it, gosh, you need to have two individuals right there. So take for a second to imagine yourself in a position where you are choosing not to marry someone because of the fact that it would reduce the amount of support that you can receive from the government.
Yeah, it's the same thing here, and a lot of times, if you do get married and like if say you're in an inter-abled relationship, so someone that's disabled and it's not disabled, and your spouse gets benefits from their place of employment, they obviously want to put you on the benefits, but you could lose the benefits you get from the government.
Mm,
And I have my partner's best friend actually is looking into getting benefits right now,
mm.
and their partner's also disabled. And I think a lot of people just think it's a quick fix, don't really understand how it works, don't understand the ins and outs of it, and I think they make it that way in purpose sometimes. They don't really give you all the facts. It's frustrating. And I was the consultant that's a huge disability consultant here in Canada. And before I even became a consultant, I was like in all of them. I was inspired by them.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought they were doing amazing, right? But they still live on benefits and they don't take certain jobs like you were saying about economic, people turn down promotions, but in a consultant aspect, turn down different jobs because they want to keep the benefits.
Mm,
Because once you lose the benefits, it's hard to get it back. You have to, and I found that in my note. And so with the ODSP, that's that's the Ontario Disability Support Program, provides a maximum of 1,408 per month for a single
mhm.
individual as of last year, and this is strictly for basic needs, so like food, clothing, shelter, rent, mortgage, utilities. And so again, like there's a lot of pigeonholing where these benefits go, and and really minimizing the use that they could be put towards.
So there's a lot of barriers that are in place, right? Like, you have a maximum amount
Mhm,
that you can earn, combination from your
mhm,
employer and from the benefits. You have a maximum amount that you can get. You also can keep a maximum amount in your bank account. Here in the States,
mhm,
it is $2,000 or $3,000 for a couple. There is an exception. There is what's called an ABLE account where you can keep up to $100,000, but most people don't know about that yet and the ins and outs of that program. So that it's overall underused. But then it's very restricting. Like this is not a
mhm,
lot of money that's kind of sloshing around here, and usually people are kind of cobbling together multiple different benefits packages. So, for
mhm,
example, they may also receive benefits from the government to cover healthcare costs because it would be utterly
mhm,
impossible for them to,
mhm,
from that meager allowance that they get from the government, to also cover the amount of healthcare
mhm,
costs as well too. So this is not exactly a lot of money, and this really hasn't been updated to actually what people need to be able to live. But I think this brings up another very important topic that is not talked about often enough, and that is the topic to me of the disability tax. In other words, it's just more expensive to be a
mhm,
disabled
mhm,
person. And
mhm,
I'll give you an example, right? Like, I have hearing aids. Fortunately, I'm provided those hearing aids through vocational rehabilitation, but that's on the condition that I'm working. And those would otherwise be $6,000 out of pocket. That usually come up like every 2 to 3 months. And while $6,000 may sound like a lot, that's relatively small compared to the cost of an accessible van if you need to have something that can
mhm,
access a wheelchair, for example.
mhm. Yeah, and it's so frustrating because a lot of people don't understand the disability tax and how much it's like using mobility aids such as, walkers, wheelchairs, canes. These things are expensive. And a lot of times they are not covered unless they're very specific. And like you said, like under that you're working, right? And so if you weren't working, that has to be out of pocket. It's like that doesn't make sense. It's like if it should be if you're not working, you should maybe be covered. But a lot of things with the benefits. It seems backwards. It seems counterintuitive to me and to other people. And I want to make a quick mention about how you mentioned about the bank account. So again, like I said, it's $40,000 is the maximum for an individual under the ODSP, but it's only $50,000 for couples. So that's joint, that's together. It's only $10,000 more. And I bring that up because it's like, okay, if it should be two people, it should be double, it should be 80,000, but it's not. Right. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense. And the disability tax, it's like, and we also have a thing called Ontario Works Share. So if you can get benefits, if you're and you can prove that you've been continuously applying for work, you're applying to jobs, you're sending in resumes, then you get another benefit. But you have to show all that documentation that you're doing and putting in that effort. And so it's a lot of work, but it seems like not a lot of payoff. But some people need this to survive and to live off of. And it's not enough.
And I think there's another important factor to continue in here too, in that sometimes the individual with the disability may not be the direct person receiving these funds and,
Hmm.
as well too. So sometimes, for example, it might be the family members. For example, my Aunt Devana, growing up, she was born intellectually disabled. She never really progressed past about 6 months. intellectually. And so she lived with my grandmother and grandfather her entire life until she died at the age of 45.
Mhm,
And so for them, having access to these benefits was able to help afford the expenses that, and
mhm,
she had a lot of expenses that were attached to her, with being able to keep her at home where she was comfortable and supported
mhm,
by my grandmother and grandfather, because they needed to have that accessible van. They needed to have care when they went on vacation.
mhm,
They needed to have all these various different things, as well as all of her various different medical conditions that were not covered by the insurance companies. And I think one of the challenges that runs particularly, one of the things that comes up sometimes in this space too, is where a family might be protective of losing those particular benefits, because they do rely off of that
mhm.
income stream for their individual.
Yeah, for sure, and I think I like how we're telling all these stories, and I think a lot of times with these benefits, I think the benefits administrator or the government, they just see people as numbers. They just see again that quick fix, that solution, but these are people's real lives.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing in this conversation. I think capitalism and it's a numbers game, and that's not right. And it's really like, okay, how is this impacting the person that has a disability's life themselves, but also the people around them, like you were mentioning about your grandparents, right? And so just really understanding how it's really shaping and impacting how people get to live their lives every day. That's what is the quality of life? I think the quality of life isn't even looked at, unfortunately, when it comes to benefits. Again, it's just the bare minimum, bare boned, and and not even thinking it's like people want to work. If if they can work, they have the ability to work, they want to work. And keeping that in consideration and make a living, make a income, and but sometimes have to survive on those benefits. And why is it so difficult when you are, maybe you could have a job, a part-time job, secure that for a while, but you might lose your benefits. And there's always that fear in the back of your mind. Um, and so I have a lot of friends that are on these benefits, and like one of my friends wanted to work part time. She got this up. She wanted to work in an art studio over the summer,
Mm.
and then but she couldn't because it would claw back her benefits. And I have other consultant friends that, again, they're still on benefits because they need it because their health is so inconsistent. And so they take these jobs, or they actually had to, I remember one friend actually had to, it was like one, they said they could do this hourly rate, and it was like a dream hourly rate for them. They just had a baby with their wife, and but they couldn't take it, the hourly they had to reduce the hourly rate they were gonna be given because they wanted to keep the benefits in case something happens.
Now, there are two kinds of different benefits here in the States. There's
Mhm,
SSI, which is most of what we've been talking about.
mhm,
And this is typically for somebody that has a lifelong condition, and usually has been born with that. But on the flip side of it, there is what's called SSDI. So that is basically more typically an acquired condition. And that is something that might be covered through a different pot of money. And the
mhm.
benefits is a little bit higher. It's up to $4,000 a month, but that's strictly contingent upon based off of how much you made when you were employed too. So what other kind of differences would you strike between SSI and SSDI?
I think for me, I think the biggest difference is, I think the allocation of where it's
Mm.
going and what it's being used for. And I think, again, I think like sometimes they do try to make it more specific to different things, but and make it more, if we make it more broad and make it more outside of just the bare necessities of life. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. So uh, now let's talk a little bit more about what we can do to
Mhm,
actually change this,
mhm,
because I feel like that is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Obviously, this is
mhm,
something that makes me upset. This is something that makes Sydney upset as well too, because we have so many people kind of within our periphery that have either denied themselves opportunities, or they have been afraid of losing benefits, or they have choose to live in meager circumstances on an
Mhm.
ongoing basis. But what do you think can be done to actually fix this?
Yeah, I think like you mentioned at the beginning, like talk to, your government or reach out to lawmakers. And I actually went to a rally. It was called a Raise the Rates rally around increasing benefits. And I think sometimes you actually just have to take to the streets and really, and so we actually have a place called Queen's Park, which is where there's a member of parliament for a provincial, and that's where bills are passed and legislation is passed on a provincial level. And so we actually took there and where people told speeches and stories, and we rallied and had these posters and really getting out there. But also, I think it's also those quiet moments and having these conversations. And I remember even my my future brother-in-law, he was like, "Oh, people with disabilities, they get benefits from the government. They don't have to work. They're so lucky." And I'm just there like, "Oh, no." And I think just educate yourself on the reality. I think so many people are not aware, and
Mm.
so educate yourself on the realities of what it means to actually get benefits. And, if you are the one getting benefits, so being able to talk about your experiences and talk about your realities. And I think overall, obviously, ideally, hopefully, we could, in the rallies or speaking up, like have convince people to increase the base amount, increase, like there's a poverty line in both countries and around the world. What does that poverty line look like? How can we get the benefits to be over that poverty line? Right. And I think also, and I think also a huge thing is to eliminate those clawbacks, so continued advocacy to really reduce that clawback of provincial disability benefits. And because I think even sometimes with the Canadian disability benefits, so that's federally, and then the ODSP, which is provincially based, I believe potentially even clawbacks can happen then if you're getting, if they feel like you're dipping into too many pools, right? And so eliminating the clawbacks and really addressing that. I think also I've seen that application with my friends, and they've told me how tedious that application process is and how invasive it is. And so I think also, simplifying the application process for these benefits, making it more clear, making it clear of what to expect when you do get the benefits, and having things more transparent. And I think I'm seeing more people that are accessibility advocates or disability advocates and advocates going into these positions and wanting to make a difference. And I think people that I'm seeing more people that are actually passionate about accessibility, and it's like really how can really meeting people where they're at, and it's like if even simplifying the application process, but also explaining the application process. This is what this means, and just because sometimes it's just like, oh, figure it out, like but really including people having if having info nights, so having information sessions about the benefits and what it is and what it isn't, and really making it more accessible in all ways of, what does it actually look like on a day-to-day basis for someone, and really, again, knowing the real stories behind these people's lives that receive these benefits and how it's impacting the day-to-day.
I'm glad that you brought up the story of the family member because I do believe that for every insensitive and or biased
Mm,
statement that somebody might be making out there in the community, there are 10 people that have the quote unquote, big air quotes here, common sense not to say something or
mm,
not to say something that could be perceived as without tact. But I think that it's just as harmful when people hold those kinds of ideas internally, and that affects how they vote, that affects
mhm,
what policies they choose to support. So paint me a picture real quick of what these benefits are used for and why it's important, even if you're not the direct
mm,
beneficiary of these benefits, even if this is something that strictly you're
mhm.
giving back, why should you care?
You should again, anyone, I think that fundamentally anyone can become disabled at any time. It could be, and I think that's the biggest reason, and you so when everyone always has you have proximity to disability, whether you think so or not, right? So like it's either becoming disabled at any given time, or someone that has a disability. And so just being mindful of how it's showing up. And with these benefits, it can make or break someone's life. And I think a lot of times people have this misconception that it's gonna make someone's life, it's gonna make people's lives better. And it does make people's lives better, but it can also make people's lives difficult. It can pigeonhole them into different things, like I keep saying. And really, there's always the good, bad, and the ugly to every story. And I think really just looking at the whole picture and getting all pieces of the, I could say it, a mosaic, like we all, there's different pieces. And so really looking at that and being able to see the whole picture and not just this picture in your mind of what you think it looks like. And I
Mm.
think even for myself, I'm gonna admit it, I was ignorant to what this, like, I knew it wasn't enough to live on, but I didn't know the nitty-gritty. I didn't know the day-to-day. Um, but my friends, I could see they were frustrated, or and I started opening my eyes and my ears to these things and really expanding my knowledge and expanding my understanding, because to really do the work I do and I think just to have a more accessible and inclusive world, we need to know the realities of what's going on around us.
I love that. So I hope that this has given you more information. By the way, in the companion article, I will include some links so that if you do need to seek out benefits for yourself, I can point you in the direction of some places to start. I will also include some more information with additional perspectives on why this topic matters, and exactly kind of like where those limitations are and what makes the disability community so frustrated. Sydney, I appreciate you coming on today to talk about this very important issue. But real quick before we go, what's new with your company?
Yeah, I think what's new with my company is really looking at like really bridging the gap of, I feel like we've been doing this for a while, but really doing it more, like really working with organizations to really help, like really look at the people and really drive. Like I'm like, yes, I'm the consultant coming in, I'm the coach coming in, but really driving in that lived experience from the organization themselves that I'm working with. So really doing like focus groups and doing surveys more intently and more intentionally to gather that data to create ways to really, because I'm just, I'm only there for a moment or not long at all, with the employees are there longer than me. And so really having their lived experience drive the work I'm doing at this organization, and helping maintain, making, if they want to be anonymous, making sure they're anonymous, but still having their voice heard at the table. And so that's been really, I've been doing that for a bit, for a while, but I think really being even more intentional and even more like, no, if you hire me, this is what we have to do first. We really have to, I want to listen to your people first, and really making that clear with the organizations I'm working with.
I love that. And where can businesses connect to you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Sydney Elaine Butler, or my website is accessiblecreates.ca.
I love it. Thank you, Sydney. Appreciate you coming on to chat with me today. And again, this has been Miles from Peak Performers signing off for now. Bye, everybody.
Bye.